So let me just start with a topic that we were discussing earlier on between local, national, and global trade, business, and how everything is intertwined, right? And how, for example, Estonia was talking about how one of their main businesses is technology and how they support international clients. So in that sense, and we'll start with Massey since I have you here. So how have you seen within the economy and your own business all these global events and generally the global economy affecting positively or negatively to your business and the Texas economy, and what are you been doing to support more competitiveness in a global stage?
Okay, that's a loaded question,
but it's a good question.
Yeah, it's a loaded question, but I will say that, look, we're always coming out of a pandemic, and I sit on the board of the Great Eastern Partnership, which is the local chamber here, and Houston has been kind of the last company to go into research, is always the first company to come out. So it's based on the workforce, the infrastructure, and the thing is that Texas has always been competitive, right? So if you look at Texas on the global stage as far as our economy, we're probably the 9th largest economy in the world, right ahead of South Korea and Canada. And so what our conditions that affected are kind of the global things, right? Energy and those kind of things that hurt. So I think what Texas has done with the leadership is preparing Texas to be a great state to invest capital, right? And so some things hurt, us, but Texas has been last to feel the pain. As you might have seen, Texas just got the golden shovel for the 10 years in a row, which means that Texas has been the best place to invest capital in the country for the last 10 years. So it's unfair to compare us to New Hampshire. But by the same token, our issues have not been impactful globally.
Now we have an event such as the war in Ukraine, which is increasing the cost of oil and gas across the country and even other parts of the world as well. With an industry that's so dependent on diesel fuels for transportation, for equipment, for machinery, for everything that we do within the industry, we're being impacted by that global economy. I think that we're going to have the counterpart of it, the benefit that we could actually start getting. It's with the new infrastructure package coming from the federal government. There's going to be an influx in cash that's going to be coming to the economy, where we're going to be growing our infrastructure, our roads, our transportation, and it's going to be benefiting airports and ports as well. So we're going to be looking a lot for grants for state and federal work that's going to be coming up. So there's a lot of those benefits that we're going to get, even though we have that global economy that's impacting us. And just in general numbers in Texas, Dallas and Houston are two of the largest construction activities markets in the country. They're probably the second and third largest markets in the country right now. Austin is a top 10 market. So Texas is a great place to do business, even in situations that we have right now with escalation and global activity impacting our business.
Thank you, Luis. So Tim, from the perspective of the port or your personal experience, so how do you see this?
Unprecedented levels of activity at our various terminals and for the Houston Ship Channel. You obviously hear so much, it's Texas, so you hear so much about energy and demands on domestic production. And that, of course, is escalating. What we see very tactically, of course, at the Port of Houston is the demand for steel pipe, drilling pipe. So you begin to see the rig counts go up in Texas and the neighboring states, and almost all of that drill pipe comes through the Port of Houston. It's not a great moneymaker for the port, but it's a very visible commodity to really illustrate that demand. So tactically, of course, we see that. And those of you who have your consumer goods that have been sitting in a box somewhere for perhaps 6 to 9 weeks, obviously we went through the pandemic, and as you know, we had the classic sort of V-shaped recovery out of the pandemic, but have grown by double digits in terms of the volume of boxes that are coming to our terminals over the last 3 to 6 months. We grew about 15% last year, and thus far into the first couple of months into 2022, we're up 30%. So there's been no end in sight in terms of inventory restocking, replenishment, consumer demand is so very high. The way we address that, of course, up until this point, we have a mantra of building capacity ahead of demand. Addressing that demand is less so our wharf and dock capacity to work the vessels. As you know, it's the volume of boxes sitting on the terminal waiting on truckers. We talked about the trucking industry. We appreciate so much the training that is being done to bring more truckers and chassis and things to move those boxes. So gosh, we are again doing all we can to facilitate a productive move of those goods on the terminal and get them off and into each of our hands and businesses as quickly as possible.
That's great. That's great. So I think throughout the day we've heard key topics, right? About labor competitiveness, about talent, supply chains being disrupted and being very critical. And now I think what brings everything together is the money, right? so I think one of the personal experience that I've seen with real estate and international business is that one of the competitive factors that we have is access to capital right now. I mean, it kind of seems that there's like so plentiful, and it's not very expensive, and it's just a matter of putting together a good business plan for growing businesses. How have you seen that locally and from the international perspective, the markets that you handle?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. So we have definitely seen an impact, and I will tell you from the, obviously I've worked with Amegy Bank, specifically with the international department. During the pandemic, yes, there is the whole idea of the lower cost money, capital that's available, but we have also seen, at least I've seen on the international side, how more and more companies outside of the U.S. continue to buy even more so from the U.S. There's a sense of trust of the product being produced, delivery, etc. So I guess to give you a short answer and to the point, there's definitely been an increase throughout because of the localization, with demand and the flow of goods, of payments internationally. But I will also say that the other side that we have seen more and more, and I will say specifically here in Houston, but I think throughout the state, is the income or inbound or foreign direct investment type of companies where there's a foreign parent that decides to come here. They likely have been doing business with U.S. entities before, and because of various issues, moving beyond the pandemic, that they have in their country, they are now basically setting roots here. So we have seen it. To your point, banks are very liquid, more than willing to lend, but it also has to go through a process of obviously qualifications. But the demand has been there. There's no question about it, and I think we're lucky enough to be here in Texas to witness that.
Perfect. I think that's a great segue. At least in terms of the construction business and real estate and all this activity that's happening, how have you been benefited from this availability of capital to build for certain markets like multifamily and others?
So we continue to attract people to Texas. We see the numbers of how much certain cities across the state are growing. And what that's creating is a need for housing, right? That's the primary thing that we need to be able to bring. So the residential market has been tremendously strong. That is going to continue growing in that regard. And what's creating is a need to continue growing infrastructure. So as we're bringing more families, more people into Texas, the governments are scrambling right now and trying to keep up with the demand, trying to keep up with how they can develop that infrastructure, how we can bring funding for additional schools and education for kids, because that's one of the key elements for people that they're going to be looking for as they move into a certain community. Healthcare facilities also growing and developing, and we're going to that centralized medical center to now having all those I'll call it suburban and non-urban medical facilities across the different cities. And you're starting to see a lot of those things develop in different elements that have to do with real estate and how real estate is being developed. The mixed-use developments across the outside of the urban centers, since the downtowns of the cities are growing tremendously. So there's a lot of activity because of the residential sector growing so fast. So it's been a benefit for the construction industry. And one thing to not forget about is even during the pandemic, construction was one of those industries that remained operating as much as it was possible. So we were still in the front line. A lot of the people that work for me, they were out on job sites. They were not at home because of the pandemic, because we took an opportunity to continue developing and growing the infrastructure.
Okay, great. So Massey, from the TAP perspective, it kind of seems to me now that could we, looking ahead, we have certain challenges. The talent, the supply chain, and probably even growing too fast. Is this an issue that we should consider in terms of how to pace that growth, or do we just want more of it as it's coming?
Well, before I answer the question, I want to recognize a colleague, Paula Mendoza, on the board of TAB. She chairs the Small Business Committee at TAB, and so we gave her the job. And I don't think you know what this means, because she is going to have to represent the interests of small business in Texas. So, former Board of Regent, former TAMAC chair, former chair of the Texas Ethics Commission. So again, thank you, Paula. Well, you know, as an entrepreneur, all of us here in the room, none of us get up and say, today I want to grow 10%, right? So we get up con ganas, right? We want to get in there. We want to go do it. Of course, we're limited by capacity, right? Capacity to grow and things. So I think that, you know, major corporations are taking these kind of steps in the global economy. There's a lot of things in transition. Again, we talked about the workforce issues. There's an availability of cash, but everything has to be kind of qualified. So in Texas, you know, we have a very fertile ground to invest capital. In the Texas legislature, their job is to create a ground where we can invest capital in Texas. So we are wide open for business. As you know, Mexico is the #1 trade partner, and you know, by 30% of goods exported to Mexico. Number 2 is Canada, and so forth. So there's an opportunity to grow in other countries. I would say that, as I talked to the CEOs, I sit on the board of the Great Eastern Partnership with the Chamber of Commerce here, and we talk about energy transition and things that are affected on the global trade. But again, I'm never, you know, in a public forum, we never talk about not wanting to grow. But yeah, there are some, you know, some little slow growth. And again, the issues of cyber are affecting us. The price of oil is not, you know, affecting trucking guys are not paying $4 a gallon for their vehicles. So yeah, there are some things that limit growth, but there's capacity of cash flow. And so yeah, there are some things still making it through.
So I think that kind of naturally brings me to the next question, because it's about innovation, right? How do we solve these problems that we have, or these challenges, in a new way, right? And in terms of how Texas collaborates nationally and internationally, and this is just an open question for the forum here, how do we see ourselves collaborating with European nations that are also doing great in creating new solutions and new innovation, and to support foreign direct investment, or to support just this regional growth? So I don't know if somebody would like to take a stab at that one.
I'll go first. Usually you go first, you have to worry. No, I think, you know, again, from my perspective, obviously on the international banking side, you know, what I said earlier, the example of the inbound, the FDI, the foreign direct investment, you know, how do we work with them? We need to be able, and I know I'm talking from the bank's perspective, but I think across the board, be able to understand not just what I would refer to as kind of within the borders, in other words, that new entity that maybe the parent company is a company out of the UK, but really understand the business from the parent perspective and be able to take that into account as we're dealing with the US subsidiary. So I guess to make it simple is we have to be able to look beyond our borders, to look at the full picture of the companies that are coming in, and then be able to work with them here locally. I mean, I think, and there's so many examples of that. I think, you know, from the perspective of what we can do actionable, I think it's that. Just make sure you take into account the parent company and all that the business does, and really understand it. But I think also we need to play to our strengths. I mean, being in Texas, the cost of living, I mean, there's a lot of, and I won't get into that, but really back to the GHP example, you know, we can get into a list of items that play to our strengths, but we need to be able to understand that and be proud of that, because a lot of companies, when they come and see how easy it is to do business in Texas, it makes a world of difference.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could dovetail what Tim said, I went with a delegation of business leaders to Washington DC to Rick Camp with the lobby for the expansion and dredging of the Port of Houston. And I'll tell you that everyone here should be on the same planet. We need to together. We talked about lobby is like talking to your legislator about the interest of having, you know, we should look at core and infrastructure money. I mean, those of us that are here, we do it all the time. But those who are engaged, and we all talk to legislators, you need to talk about the infrastructure investments that are important to Texas. Today, make no mistake, we are in competition with the Chinese. Today, the Chinese are buying all of the raw materials to make chip manufacturing. If you think right now there's a lot of cars that are not happening because there's not enough chips. The Chinese are buying the raw materials to make chips. So we have to get competitive in the United States to get chip manufacturing and get those semiconductors instead of Texas. And so, but then lastly, there is a bill that in the last legislative session was killed by the extreme left and the extreme right. For the first time, politically, a business bill was killed. We're getting all of you to help. It's called Chapter 313. And what that initiative is that school districts are allowed to, let's just take ExxonMobil, for instance. ExxonMobil goes to Baytown, Texas. The Baytown School District gives them a abatement on their tax over 10 years. And so you don't have to abate and we'll freeze your tax base for 10 years as it goes up. ExxonMobil takes that dollar and invests in the plant's maintenance and construction, or maybe even the port. Those dollars create jobs, create investment, create expansion, and then the state of Texas makes up those dollars in difference back to the school district. So the Chapter 313 initiative in Texas is really big. If we're going to continue to expand the port, or we're going to expand in the industrial base of Texas, we have to have incentives like that in the enterprise fund to help close our deals. Because if we do a big major expansion in a plant or anything, those of us in the room, our smaller business, get to eat off that opportunity. So again, it's not just us here that we're talking about these big global initiatives. They actually roll out to all of us as small business. So you should continue to be involved with the chamber and talk about the things we're doing. Pauline with TECC, and there's a lot of issues that you might say, well, you know, what do I care about? I don't do business with the port. Well, they do business with the port with big containers. Those jobs, those truckers, those people that subcontract, it's the stuff that we do as small business in Texas. So I want to applaud the port because they're the largest container for international trade from Mexico and from other countries. So yeah, it's really important that again we lobby to. I don't call it lobby, but represent the interests of advocate.
Let's advocate.
Yeah, lobby's at the register. We just advocate.
We're just advocating. So let me just, as we draw to a close, please. So how do you, like, if I give you a crystal ball, right? How do you see the next? I'm not even going to say 5 years, but the next 3 years, and the challenges for the economy or the benefits that we're going to be seeing in the next few months.
For the next 3 years?
Yes.
So, like I said, for us as we're looking into the construction industry, I think that we have a tremendous opportunity in front of us with this infrastructure bill that's coming up. This is going to create opportunities to create generational projects. When you think about it, a lot of things that we're trying to fix, a lot of things that we're trying to work on, they've been in place for the last 180 years or so. We need to come and fix bridges, roads, we need to fix our infrastructure, and then we need to get into a lot of those things into the 21st century, as we're talking about electrical vehicles, you're talking about sustainability, resiliency, you're talking about green initiatives. All those kind of things are going to be impacting and benefiting the construction industry in how we execute projects, how much more money we need to invest for us to be able to keep pace with other economies, to be able to keep pace with Europe, to be able to keep pace with China and other economies across the globe, for us to continue being an economy that's viable, that's attractive for other countries or other industries to continue investing on. So I see a tremendous opportunity. Now, it's going to be about resources, people. That's going to be our biggest challenge as we face this tremendous growth that we anticipate is going to happen. Where are we going to find the right resources, the people that we're going to be able to bring over? I think this is going to turn more into more of a global economy. We're seeing more and more people from other countries wanting to come to work to the United States, having to find opportunities here in the United States because they're seeing the growth that we're experiencing. So I just see a great level of opportunity there. I'm afraid or a little bit worried about small businesses and the small businesses having opportunities to get involved, minority businesses getting involved, and that's part of what we do at the RHCA, trying to stay in contact with the governmental organizations and agencies, working with folks like the Texas Association of Business and the Chambers of Commerce and so on, so we can all have a unified message in trying to help disadvantaged and small businesses get involved in a lot of what's coming up, because there's going to be a lot of opportunity for everybody to grow.
I just want to really appreciate you guys being here with us and everybody for assisting. Thank you very much. We'll be definitely doing more of these every quarter. We're going to be visiting different cities, but we'll definitely keep tabs on Houston, which is a key center for development in the state. Thank you very much.